Hello and welcome back to the latest episode of the Oh No 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 podcast. Now, this evening we're back to discuss a basketball game as described by Dougie Imrie in his post-match interview. Raith Rovers saw off his former employers, Greenock Morton, and our old employee, Ian Murray, in a 3-2 chaotic victory, shall we say. I'm joined firstly, my name of course being Robbie. I'm the host for this evening. I'm joined by my second favourite Cameron. We've got Duncan Cameron. How are you getting on?
I'm delighted to be ranked that highly.
Who else is there? David Cameron. He's very exceptionally low down the list.
Cameron Diaz in the mud here.
Colin Cameron is getting maybe at the service.
If I'm ahead of Colin Cameron, I'm doing all right. So yes, I'm delighted, mate. Happy to be here.
Good stuff. And my second favourite man that's like with Open. We've got Leslie Maven. How are you getting on, Les?
I'm glad I'm only second favourite after Bob McIntyre's entertainments in the US Masters course this week. Great to see a game involving an Ian Murray side that involves the team that's leading going behind and atrocious defending from cross balls that we aren't on the receiving end of this week. So yeah, good result and looking forward to talking about it.
Yeah, I am not a golf persona at all. My grandfather was. He once tried to introduce me to golf and it did not go well. He did not have the patience for it. So fortunately I ended up at Starks Park watching games like yesterday instead. Right, so Duncan, your last appearance on this podcast was basically post-match for the Ayr United game. So a little bit's obviously gone on since then. We've picked up another cup competition and had yesterday, of course. How are you feeling about the vibes about Rovers at the moment? Having a little vibes check with you.
Yeah, it's good. I'm enjoying it. It's nice. It's I think the more or less like the last thing I said on the last episode that I was on was that I think the players would have really deserved to lift a trophy. And largely that was because I really like all of them. There's nobody in that team that I'm like, get to the summer and we'll get rid of that guy. And for periods of the last kind of 6 months, like results have been getting in the road of that. Like I really like the manager, I really like the players, and they kept getting beat, and it made it really difficult to kind of stay on side. But I think throughout that, poor away form, really, it just happened to be that we only played away games. The sort of belief was there, I suppose, that they would be able to turn it around at some point. And at times, I think it was maybe a hope of once Dougie Imrie gets the summer, he'll be able to turn this around. So really, really pleasing to see it come together a little bit sooner than that. And I think it's been, yes, very enjoyable, very well deserved as well. I mean, even going back to those 3 games in a week that culminated with the Ayr game, like, yeah, we get beat by Thistle, but we played well. So we've played well in all the games that we've won, and played well in the game that we lost, which is it's a nice place to be. And yes, I thoroughly enjoyed myself at Firhill as well.
Yes, it was a good day out, to say the least, and enjoyable. And it's good that we do have that sort of positivity. Of course, we'll come down to this, as I often say, we'll come to this later on, but Dougie Imrie very much sort of talking about that and referring to it in his post-match interview, but we've of course got the game to discuss firstly. And even before that, Leslie, I want to mention a bit about Friday, where Queen's Park dispatched Ross County with a 1-goal victory. That famous Aidan Connolly header. I don't know who the lead commentator for BBC Scotland was, but they kind of made a
Andrew Petrie, something like that.
Mr. Petrie needs to get his facts right, because he was discussing Aidan Connolly, and I don't think he's scored too many headers, which we of course know is absolute nonsense. Aidan Connolly with his aerial prowess, and of course once getting a double down at Capello. And yes, Queen's Park dispatched Ross County in that game, Leslie. Was that a degree of pressure added on for Rovers to try and keep pace with the Spiders going into next week?
To an extent, yes. But it also alleviated any pressure at the bottom end of the table. So I think what you've always been saying, and well, I've certainly always been thinking in Ross County, is if you looked at the quality of the squad and the depth, you got the feeling that if they clicked, they could win a number of games and they could fire themselves out of trouble. And indeed, in the co-commentary, Michael Stewart was gagging for Jordan White to come on. He was absolutely desperate for Jordan White to come on, and that he should be on. He's going to be amazing. When Jordan White comes on, he's going to score. And I'm thinking, mate, you've not seen any of Ross County this season, because that categorically is not going to happen. And indeed, I think the thing for me, I watched that, and the same as you saw in the 4-0 defeat to Airdrie, you just saw virtually no urgency or fight from Ross County. That's what would have concerned me if I was a Ross County fan, was that there was no, they're effectively going out. They're effectively going into relegation places, to be confirmed in relegation places, and there's virtually no fight on the pitch. Okay, there was a rammy after the full-time whistle had gone, but that's not what you want. There was no urgency to get up. There was no fight to get up. There was no goalies coming up for set pieces or any of that. There was just no actual urgency. And that's what really concerns me. It does make you think that they've effectively chucked it, which is a remarkable state of affairs when you consider the amount of money that they spent in that team in the summer, the experience of the guys that they've brought in. I mean, my firm belief is that about half those guys, if Brora Rangers come up, half those guys will be playing a league below with Brora next season. But no, on the Queen's Park side of it, I mean, Queen's Park have done really well. And I see Sean Crichton's getting the "what a job he's doing" treatment. He's starting to get that from a lot of people. And, and some of it is to some extent justified. So we'll come on to this later. But they've only lost 3 games at their home ground this season in the league. And one of those was to St Johnstone, one was to Partick. And the other, weirdly enough, was to Ross County. So they've done very, very well at home. And all credit to them for that. I mean, I don't know what to expect when we play them. But yeah, I mean, it's, in a way, as I say, my immediate thought when that game happened was, right, okay, that's effectively us clear of the automatic relegation spot, and it's one less team that can catch us. And it's one of those ones, it becomes not such a good result if we then go on and win the Saturday and you're trying to just get as close to 5th as you can. But it becomes a great result from a safety point of view. So being the eternal pessimist of me, I was quite happy with that. We've still got a game where we can try and take Queen's Park on their own terms if we're worth our salt.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll come on to talk about that because, of course, this episode will cover both Tuesday's game and yesterday's match. Leslie, I'm actually going to stick with you for this next point. So Rovers, Dougie Imrie names an unchanged starting 11, but we do see the return of Jordan Doherty and Andy Winter to the bench. Nobody really surprised with the decision to stick with that starting 11 from the cup final, but just positive to see that we've added some depth onto the bench.
Oh, definitely. I mean, as you say, you can't bin people off after they've won a cup. That's unless somebody's been injured or has had an absolute nuke or something, or had a fight in the dressing room. You can't bin somebody off after they've won a cup. And the guys that are in there are their men. And Graham actually said it in the pre-match with regard to Doherty. You might think the logical thing to do would be to take Rowe out, put Doherty in, for example. But it's now, the onus is now on Doherty to fight his way back in the team. Rowe's done broadly fine. Well, he's been out. We'll come on to him later, I'm sure. But yeah, I mean, absolutely zero surprise with that lineup. Good to have the depth, though, given that we've got 3 games coming up in the space of a week. It is a small squad. We've asked an awful lot of those guys recently. Again, I'll maybe touch on this later, but that might be what ends up being a bridge too far for us. Is just, it's a small pool of players, and we've asked an awful lot for them. But having a couple of guys who you can go to, one in the defensive spots and one in the attacking spots, especially something like Doherty, who you can put in a number of different places, is absolutely a good thing. And it's good to have a few healthy bodies back. And just on that as well. So I was watching on Wraith TV, and I think Davey Hancock had said Paul Hanlon is really not far away. They said Tuesday, I think, might be too soon, but it came up certainly in the commentary that Paul Hanlon is not a million miles away. So that's reassuring as well.
Yeah, absolutely welcome return when he does get back in. I know that he's not been away for long, but if you have him on the bench, it's like even with Darryl O'Connor coming in, you've certainly Paul Hanlon's got a lot more experience than Darragh O'Connor, but at the same time, it's a recognised first-team player that could, by and large, fit into a large number of the squads at this level. Duncan, positive reception for Ian Murray on his return to Starks Park. Yeah, good to see.
Yeah, definitely, absolutely, and as expected as well. I think we've all got our sort of pantomime villains and all that kind of stuff, and even at the game at Capel, there was a little bit kind of between the dugouts, and I think had it not been for the fact that the Rover support were kind of stuck at the bottom end in that stand and couldn't really see it, there might have been a little bit more kind of stick during the game. But at the end of the day, I think everybody recognises that Ian Murray, in the time that he had the job, did an incredibly good job for us. And from a supporting standpoint, we never really had the chance for it to sour either. He sort of it's like it's better to burn out than to fade away. He just disappeared one day, and we never really got that chance. So it was nice to get it. I'm sure he would have much rather had the 3 points, but I think you could see, again, as far as the support's concerned, they seem to appreciate that kind of initial welcome as well. And I thought he might get it again at the end of the game, and I think the applause was there, and he was very, very angry having watched what he'd had. So yes, I think we can forgive him for just heading straight down the tunnel at that point.
Well, we'll move into the game itself. So early on in the first half, Rovers generally created the lion's share of the chances. I don't think Morton actually did too much even before their opening goal. We saw J. Rowe put a header wide, and then both Kai Montague and Paul Niso putting through Big Innes, but he's been denied by Murray Johnson and then Zach Delaney. For you, Duncan, good to see a mix of opportunities in there?
Yes, definitely. I thought we were really, really good in the first half. Actually, having watched the interview after the game, I thought we were better than Dougie Imrie did. There was a bit of disgruntlement from the south stand in that first half, particularly when the ball was being passed around the back line. But for me, I thought it was fine. I was quite happy. I didn't really have any concerns with it at all. It felt like there was more purpose to it than it did 4, 5, 6 weeks ago, where it was kind of being shuffled to the left-hand side. You'd have a big kind of shrug of the shoulders and it would get shuffled to the right-hand side, and you'd get a different big shrug of the shoulders. Whereas yesterday it just seemed a bit more like, we'll try down the left. Actually, there's nothing there. Right, we'll come to the right. There is an angle more often than not, and you've got to allow for the opposition as well. There's a thing that Jim said in Wraith TV a good number of times, which I really, really like. The opposition are allowed to be good. I think that's a good mantra to remember. But also, the opposition are allowed to have a game plan, and Morton's was to stop us playing through them as much as they could. So of course we're going to end up with the ball on the back line. It's like that's fine, that's all right. And as I say, I was a little bit surprised / put out, I suppose, when people were kind of shouting and bawling about it in the first half. And then Dougie Imrie's interview was like, I thought we were far too slow in the first half. So maybe he would have been shouting and bawling and booing from the south stand as well. And I'm certainly not going to argue with him. But no, I'd say that opening period, we were creating chances. It wasn't like we were half an hour in, we were passing it across the back line, and we hadn't crossed the halfway line up to that point. It was passing it in the back line between J-Rowe hitting the bar. As you say, Innes Cameron, 2 good chances where he's played through where I don't think he does anything wrong with either of them. The goalkeeper does well with the first, the defender does well with the second. It felt like a goal was coming, and I didn't think it would be from Morton. Put it that way. I don't think there was any period in this game where we weren't the better side. Even that game against Ayr that you mentioned, where over the piece, we were by far and away the better team. But immediately after half-time, they had a little spell. I don't think Morton had a little spell in this game. So there wasn't really any point where I was sort of displeased. It's just, obviously those first half chances just sort of come and go without one of them going in. But again, as you've said, a lot of games we would go the first 40 minutes without creating anything at all. So the fact that none of them went in, I wasn't particularly concerned.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think that when I was looking at it, you're seeing so much more now compared to maybe 5 or 6 weeks ago, and we kind of spoke about this in our group chat during the game. Kai Montague's a really good example where 5 or 6 weeks ago, he doesn't pick up that ball, spin and run with it. And then he gets ahead of, I think it might have been Grant Gillespie at the time.
Grant Gillespie runs off, yeah.
And he's like, okay, I've got the confidence to go in and take this. And it's not going to work 100% of the time. And we'll come on to his game overall that he had yesterday. But it
is exactly that, though. Sorry, just to jump in. It's confidence. It's exactly. Because when he spins off Gillespie at first, it's brilliant. But you're absolutely right. 4 or 5 weeks ago, he would have spun off Grant Gillespie like that and been so delighted that he'd done it, he'd have played a pass immediately. And he'd be like, I've done a really good thing. Where's Dylan? Just spin. Right, there's a tick in a box. Like, I have contributed. I'm going to give the ball to someone else. And yesterday, he's playing like he's a first-team player. He's playing like he's the equal of everyone else. So he spins and he just goes. And it's a really well-weighted pass as well. So he gets us 40 yards further up the park and then slips in his Cameron. It's really, really good.
There was one up in Dingwall in the first game that we played, and that was the one that jumped out for me. Is he got a break of the ball in midfield, and he was kind of driving forward, but you felt like he didn't have as much belief then. Whereas now he's a bit like, right, this is my job, I'm doing this, I'm going. And it's great to see now. It's great to see that he's got that belief.
It's that, like, it's the ball breaks and you shoot from 25 yards. Like, if it doesn't go in, you know whoever your wide options are going to shout at you for it. And it's like, are you willing to take that or not? Mm-hmm. And again, I'd say, I think 6 weeks ago, he probably wasn't. He was sort of deferring to whoever it was. So he just doesn't take the shot on and he goes wide. Whereas now I think he'll take the shot and it's fine. Like, it's the same as everyone else. You'll get shouted at that constantly if you're playing next to Dylan.
Les, I'm going to bring you in here. What was your perspective? Because you watch it on Raith TV, obviously, not in the South Stand. You'll be able to pick up, of course, the sort of the background noise and the sort of mood music, I'm sure, by looking at things online and sort of seeing things. Because we do go close, as you alluded to earlier on. J. Rowe has that header that hits off the bar. I mean, positive as well to see him getting up in the box on a sort of attacking phase of play. But just what were your thoughts in terms of our sort of build-up in the first half?
There's a reason that ourselves and Morton have got the exact same points tally with 80% of the season done. We're not going to go out and brutalise them and be 3-0 up within 20 minutes. There's a reason that we've got the same. At the start of play, we had the same points tally. And that is that we're two, albeit with different dynamics, two broadly similar teams with regard to our performance. But, I mean, I think there's other players I picked up as well. The one that really struck me was Dara O'Connor. So, 3-4 weeks ago, Dara O'Connor will get the ball in defence and he will launch it. But you could see him actually just taking that second, thinking about what he's doing. And there's one point quite early on, you could see the cogs turning. And he thinks, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to play a pass along the ground. And he does that, and an attacking move comes off it. And it's just people actually being not afraid to do things and thinking about what they're doing that then has an effect on everybody else. So, for example, Dylan Easton. So there's a couple of times in the first half, Easton gets the ball. And then rather than trying to take everybody on like a set of human codes, he thinks, actually, no, like there's Paulencio. This is not just a bag of bibs from Rangers. This is actually a skilled, talented player. I can give the ball to him and he's going to go and he's going to do something with it. So it benefits everybody. If you've got guys out there who are thinking about what they're doing, they're not just reverting to type. And, you know, I'd said before the game as well that that's maybe just a confidence thing. Okay, some of our wins have come against pretty weak teams, but it builds that confidence and that belief that you're going to try things that you didn't do before. And that means that the guys that were having to do the heavy lifting before, like Easton, like Fordyce as well, you know, to a similar extent, like Josh Mullen, they're not feeling they have to do everything themselves because the other guys around them are going to try and do things as well. Montague, again, a great example of that. He just charges right the way through, and he could have been forgiven for taking a shot there. So he fires it into Ennis Cameron, who's unlucky not to score. Then Montague carries his run all the way in, and Davy Sinclair style swings on the bar. Whether that's out of frustration or whether it's just out of kind of being bumped up, I don't know. That made me laugh for some reason. He jumps, and he grabs the bar and swings on it and drops down. I know it is. It's a confidence thing, and with some of the younger players, I don't think it's right or fair to say that, oh, where have these guys been all season? I think this has just been a development that's happened as they've had game time and as they've come on. So Paul Ensio, he said this himself in his post-match, that he's had guys around him who have been much more senior, who are just, giving him that encouragement. You'll go on, try things, do things. So he'll have benefited from that as well. And he's come on in leaps and bounds, but Kai Montague's another one too. So, across the whole piece, I think I was encouraged to the extent that I thought, you know what, if we go behind, for the first time in a very long time, I would actually back us to get back into this, which turned out to be something that we needed to do.
Yeah, and Duncan, talk us through the Morton opener. Are you... I know Paul Inseo's been mentioned. We'll talk about the rest of his game very shortly, but arguable attribution for the blame game, if we're getting that critical.
Yeah, if you're going to force me to point the finger at someone, yes, I suppose it is. Paul, I'm reverting to Niso, by the way, in light of a couple of interviews recently. It's funny where this goal comes from, and it's basic stuff. It's a throw in, but it's something that I think happened a fair bit in the game, which is that Ian Wilson, who, I think it's safe to say this podcast, we are reasonably positive about Ian Wilson. Every time we play Morton, he always seems to kind of stand out. I don't think he did particularly well with his defending yesterday, but what he did do was he kept stepping out. He kept stepping into the midfield, which makes sense. He's a midfielder. And I think that's a little bit of where this goal comes from in a very basic sense at the beginning, that Ian Wilson is pushed right up on that right-hand side, and Kai Montague goes out to him to sort of close him down. And sort of lurking behind them is Grant Gillespie. And it's almost like... Again, I don't think this is. I'm not pointing the finger at Kai Montague, because ultimately Wilson's got the ball. But it's like if you were matching them up man for man on a diagram, he's kind of going to the wrong man. He should be matching up with Gillespie, but because of where Wilson's come in to kind of be part of the game, he has to go. And this is where I think you need to sort of reorganise somewhere. It's probably... Ennis Cameron probably has to actually end up getting involved to kind of cut this out at source. And again, I don't think that's something you could criticise him for not doing. But yes, you're right. Once that ball is played to Grant Gillespie, he's got a lot of time. And again, I think it's a symptom of the same thing. Paul Niso switches off for a half second, but I don't think it's loss of concentration for that half second. I think it's indecision between, do I actually need to go to that free man who has the ball? Or do I need to stay with the midfielder I have actually picked up, probably correctly in the first instance? And that's all it takes. That little half second just lets Cammy Blues run off him. And it's a great finish. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say it's the only finish that he's got available to him that ends up in the goal.
Yeah.
If he goes any lower than that, I think Josh Ray keeps it out. If he goes across the goal, I think Josh Ray keeps it out, or it's going to actually hit off someone else. Really, all he can do there is spin and lash it into the top corner. And the fact that he does do that, I think you've got to give him full credit for it.
It's one that's very similar to... Lewis Vaughan has a very similar chance right at the death of the game. And
yes.
It goes high and over the bar.
I think exactly that. I think he's got that in his mind. Where he's just thinking, actually, I've seen someone do this earlier on. I am just going to rifle this and see what happens.
So that brings us into half-time. As you say, Duncan, there was a reasonable degree of frustration, I would say, in the South Stand. A few sort of boos and things like that. But I would hope for the most part there was a degree that also there was a realism, rightfully, as you mentioned, that, again, two teams playing the game, and Morton had taken their chance. We've been in this situation before where teams will come to Starks Park and they'll maybe take their first chance and then they'll be able to sit in, and sort of that was a discussion around about me and in terms of the people that I was sitting with and sort of what we were talking about in terms of the game. The second half starts, Les, and Dougie Imrie makes his first really big call of the game, where on 50 minutes, Kai Montague gets hooked, and then Scott Brown comes on to replace him. Do you think it's fair to say it was a mixed bag of an afternoon for Kai Montague? He'd had that sort of burst and run before to set up in his Cameron, but he'd had also a cutback. Well, not really so much a cutback. It was cut out in the box when he had either caught in two minds between shooting and passing, and then also a few heavy touches and things. Or do you think that was potentially Dougie Imrie looking at the sort of physicality within the two teams and sort of saying, like, Brown, in terms of prime in his career, he'll be able to bring a sort of physical aspect into our pace and energy in the heart of midfield?
I'm not sure what the actual logic is, but all that kind of makes sense. I think one of the overriding factors would be you've got a very capable midfield there in Morton, particularly with Cammy Blues, but also with Ian Wilson stepping in as well. Whether you're then just trying to think, right, okay, you want to match them with a bit of experience and somebody who can take that on. The other thing as well I'd wondered was, okay, so we'd had a bit of joy in the first half with just charging through the Morton midfield. And again, maybe Wilson having to be part of the defence was one of the reasons for that. But if there's one person who loves running through the midfield like their Crash Bandicoot with the mask on and then shooting with great power from the edge of the box, it is Scott Brown. So whether the thinking was right, okay, we can maybe capitalise a bit on some of the space we're getting there by bringing on a guy who loves to get a shot away and indeed loves to score a goal from that area as part of it. Maybe it's also, the fact Kai Montague's played a lot of football recently. I know he's young. He's been involved in a lot of games. He's had a lot of game time, having not had a lot of game time for the rest of the season. Whether it was just one eye to that, okay, maybe he's just getting a bit, psychologically and physically a bit ragged, having played a lot, and it was just thinking, okay, we give him 50 minutes. It's never good for anybody's morale to hook them at halftime, unless somebody has had an absolute nuke, or unless you're Scott Brown with a goalkeeper. It's just not good form to hook someone at halftime. So we were starting, I think we were probably getting into that acceptable territory where you think, okay, you've had halftime, you've had 5-10 minutes. This is an acceptable point to make something that everybody is going to accept as a tactical change. So yeah, again, as I say, I think you're bringing somebody on who's got the physicality, who can, he did it in the cup final. Scott Brown came on and played in that more advanced role in the cup final and actually contributed to a goal happening. You've also got somebody who, if we've got space and you've got defenders and midfielders who are standing off, you've got somebody who is going to not be afraid to shoot on sight if you get that. So yeah, I'm not sure what the logic was, but it seemed to be, I think, the right thing to do at that juncture in the game. One thing I would just maybe add. On you go.
I've just two very quick points on that. So one thing is, I wonder if the timing was waiting to see what Ian Murray was going to do. Aye. Because when you watch that first half, if you've got a Morton hat on, and you think, right, we've actually been second best for 45 minutes there, but we are 1-0 up, it would make quite a lot of sense to make some kind of change. Try and change the pattern of the game, try and kind of make the most of this goal that you've got. So I wonder if it's Dougie Imrie basically going, right, let's just hang fire, see what he's going to do, and if he's still doing the same thing, I can go forward with, my plan A or plan B, whatever it would be, at that point, and make that change. And the other thing in terms of the change itself, it let Paul Niesel get further forward. And I wonder how much of that was part of the rationale. And given what happens with the Equaliser, I imagine, even if it wasn't true, Dougie Imrie will tell you that was part of the rationale.
Yeah, I mean, when we're talking about Morton with their circumstances, it is worth remembering that they did come to Fife last week and went 1-0 up through Cammy Blues, and then they're in this position where they think this has happened before. How do we try and prevent that from happening again? Which ultimately they failed to do. So yeah, we move on, and Rovers have a few half chances. Ross Matthews tries to replicate Cammy Blues, but also much like Lewis Vaughan, unfortunately, doesn't hit the back of the net. But also you've got J. Rowe with an overhead kick of sorts to give him his credit in the right place. But it was J. Rowe that really had the next major talking point on the hour mark. For you, Duncan, do you think that was a foul from Nathan Shaw to bring him down in the box?
Yes. Yes, I do. I do, on balance, and having watched it a few... So, immediately, live, I thought it was. Straight away, I thought it was. If there was any sort of mitigation in it, I wondered if Rowe had maybe started to go down a little bit early. I think the kindest interpretation would be anticipated the contact. And I just wonder if there was a slight element of that. But obviously the referee doesn't buy that at all. He's pointing at the ball. He's very specifically saying, no, he's played the ball. So I was keen to see it back. Having watched it back, certainly it is possible that, I think it's Nathan Shaw? I think it's Nathan Shaw. Gets something on it. But actually, having gone back to it, forensically and repeatedly, I think J. Rowe plays the ball away. I think what he does is he protects the ball effectively. And as Nathan Shaw, his foot is almost coming down, I think Rowe shifts the ball with his instep and then is taken away. Yes, at the time and now, on balance, I think that is a penalty kick.
I think that you've got to give J. Rowe a lot of credit for the actual movement into the box. I know that we've been very critical in terms of how aggressive he is going forward, and I think that, again, that's something that's changed over the last wee bit. It's been more reassuring to see. But when you watch it on the highlights and you look at how Nathan Shaw just completely switches off for the first bit, and he's got a lot of work to do to try and get back level, and I think that lends itself to being that he's got so much work to do. He almost overcorrects, and effectively, from my point of view, I think that he does foul him. But then that leads us very nicely. The South stands up in arms, Leslie, and there was a man that steps up to be able to rectify the situation very quickly. And as Davy Hancock puts on Ref TV, as you'll know, spare some blushes for Lloyd Wilson, the referee. Talk us through that equaliser from Paul. I'll change the pronunciation to Niso to keep it correct on this,
the style guide.
This level.
The style guide. So I'll stick with Aincio because we nobody seems to know how to pronounce this guy's name, so I'm going to stick with Aincio. So he does a brilliant little back heel to Lewis Stevenson, to Dylan Easton. And then, like I was saying before, 3-4 weeks ago, Dylan Easton is just going to try and take every single human being on and shoot. But no, he gives it to Paul Aincio, who then just decides to take it on a wee run. And what he does first is he sits Cammy Blues down, and he weaves one way and the other. Cammy Blues falls over and sits and ties his shoelaces. Then all we can assume that Paul Aincio does is he activates a force field, because every Morton player just shoots back 3 metres away from him and just opens up this lovely bit of space for him in the box to get so we've not had a chance to stop being angry at Lloyd Wilson, or at least I hadn't, when Paul Aincio gets the ball. And there's a lovely little back heel to Lewis Stevenson, who then finds Dylan Easton. And again, like I was saying in the first half, 3, 4, 5 weeks ago, Dylan Easton tries to take every single person on by himself and do the whole business himself. But, he's got the trust or whatever, the will to pass it to Aincio, who then goes on a wee run. First of all, he sits down Cammy Blues and makes him fall over. Cammy Blues just goes and ties his laces up. Then all that we can describe is that what Paul Aincio does is he activates a force field, because every single Morton player seems to disappear for a good 3-4 metres away from him to give him acres of space in the box to get a shot away. And it's like the ideal situation I used to get in Pro Evo every so often, where you weave in at the right angle and you've just got space in the box and you just press square to the right level and you shoot. Now, I was... In the first half, I was thinking, oh no, we've got one of these wee hyper goalkeepers who's saving everything and we're not going to get anything past him all day. Thankfully, it's turned out not to be the case, because Paul hit a brilliant shot straight on target, straight to the goalkeeper, who then just flaps at it and it sails straight into the net. But again, like we were saying before, this goes back to the confidence thing. You've got a guy there who's got the confidence to take a run and also just shoot straight as a die, straight as an arrow, straight at the goal. So a tremendous bit of play all round from a guy that's been in a very, very rich vein of form for us recently.
Yeah.
So I was talking to a mate of mine on Friday who is a Rangers supporter, unfortunately. But he takes a real interest in their kind of the young players and all this kind of stuff. So he was asking me about Paul Niso. And I text him when that goal goes in. I text him and say, he's just scored a brilliant goal. You know, it's a busy box and he's cut inside, he's beat at least two men and then he's hammered it into the goal. And you watch it back and it's like, nah, he's not. He's beat one guy. He should have to beat two or three. Like, there is space for two or three defenders for him to have to go by, and he just doesn't. As you say, there's nobody there. It's I mean, I suppose we should credit Paul Niso for finding the space, but the space was very much there to be found from a Morton perspective.
Yeah, I would say it looked like he gained a lot of confidence with the ball coming into him at his feet, and he has a play about with it. And once he gets it back for the second time, he's like, actually, I can just have a go here. And he goes past Cammy Blues, rightfully, as you say. What I really liked about this goal is, bearing in mind the proximity to the penalty shout for J. Rowe, it's just how well we kept the head. Nobody was over arguing with the referee or having a go, because you can sometimes see that players will have a go at a referee and then the referee says, hold on, I'm stopping the game, I'm not having this, and then they get a booking. Scott Brown and Callum Fordyce get the ball sort of about the halfway line. Fordyce plays it off to Brown and he's just very composed. Again, we've been critical about Scott Brown to a degree this season about maybe a lack of composure or a lack of willingness to play the ball forward. He does it really well. Paul Niso's in there, gathers it, and the rest is history. Leslie, I'm going to come back to you again, just in the interests of equality and parity within this podcast. Very shortly again after that, so it was a second penalty shout within a minute, because after the restart, Ian Wilson brings down Dylan Easton. Now, Lloyd Wilson, of course, adjudges this to be outside of the box. What was your perspective, having seen it on Rafe TV? Was that the correct call? Because I know that Davy Hancock wasn't as sympathetic, shall we say?
Yeah, I watched it back. For me, the foul happens just outside the box. Having said that, Denmark got a penalty against Scotland for a foul under very similar circumstances, albeit at the side rather than the edge, and there was some interpretation of the rules that if there was any part of the boot was in touching a blade of grass that's painted white as a penalty or something like that. But I looked at it back from the angles I could see. I think there's less of a shout for a penalty for that one for me than there is for the first one, which again I still can't make my mind up on. I think Shaw is lucky because he does lead with his elbow, and if you're leading with an elbow into somebody in a box, you're always on the risk. But for a second one, no, for me, of the various shouts we had, that is the one that I think is least a penalty, simply because from the angle I saw, it looked like the contact happened just outside the arc.
Yeah, well, we continue on with the frantic 5-minute spell, Duncan. Curtis Main misses a one-on-one, or was it edged out by our defence? I'll let you be the judge on that. But then within, 5 passes, the ball is then up the other end in the back of the Morton net. So talk us through that roller coasters, I don't know, it's the loop pretty much of emotions that was going on at that point in the game.
Yeah, it is funny, this game. It was a funny game because, like I said already, and I stand by it, I don't think there was any period in this game where Morton looked better than we did. But they did look dangerous on the break. And that's a great example of it, where in the end, because Curtis Main puts it right at Josh Ray, and because it is so quickly followed by a Rovers goal, it kind of lessens the impact of it. But ultimately, he's running through at one point, and he does really well. It's really, really similar to a chance that Michael Ruth had for Queen's Park in that Friday night game, where it's almost exactly the same thing, where he is clean through, but as the defenders overtake him, he does really well to sort of retain control of the ball and make space for the shot. And whereas Michael Ruth went kind of too wild and put it over the bar, Curtis Main sort of hasn't gone wild enough, and it's straightforward for Josh Ray. But then I think this is where Morton really start to fall apart. Is you said right at the very beginning, quoting Dougie Imrie, that it was a bit of a basketball game. Morton's felt like the entire game they were either sort of on offense or on defense. And that's a really good example of it, where they kind of flood forward in support of Curtis Main. And as soon as the ball's turned over, they're all at sea. There's nobody's where they should be. Nobody's got a real handle on what's going on.
Dylan Easton's so free in terms of Josh Ray
just in the middle of the park.
Ball, turns and he's just straight.
Like how often do you see it where the goalkeeper comes away with the ball like that, and he looks up and he's maybe got two kind of half options, and he decides, like, actually, I'm not going to, and he does a big calm down thing, and people get on at him. There's just no question about it with this. It's like, I can just give the ball to Dylan, and I can see that he can turn around and take it away. There's no risk. And even when it goes out to Josh Mullen, like Josh Mullen, just as he's receiving the pass, is just pointing for Jay Rowe and telling him where to go. And it's not a trick. It's not like a ruse. He's just saying, right, Jay, just go down there and I'll give you the ball. And the defenders can't do anything about it. They're not well positioned enough to be able to do anything. You said a couple of minutes ago that we've been quite critical of Jay Rowe. I would like to exclude myself from that, please. I am fully Jay Rowe pilled and have been throughout. And this is a belter of a cross. Oh, it's such an easy one to put in the stand, where he's got time to sort of get behind it, but not, he's still taking it at full flight. And that's the cross you want. And it's one of these that very easily could end up with Paul Niso put in. It's just, it's at a good height. He's just not quite there. And it's almost, if you did a bit of a question of sport, and it would be very boring, I suppose. Nothing hilarious happens. But if you were playing what happens next as the ball goes past Paul Niso here, if your points were on the line, you'd probably say, Ian Wilson's going to deal with this. He's maybe 70-30 favourite to get the next touch on the ball. It's not an easy piece to defend, again, partly because the cross is so good. There's a reasonable chance that your defender gets to it first and puts it in his own goal. But full credit to Ennis Cameron. 70-30 against him getting the touch on this. And not only does he get a touch, he puts it straight in the goal. If I was being critical from a Morton perspective, I would maybe suggest that that's why you would play a defender instead of a midfielder there. I think they had 3 centre-halves on the bench. You'd fancy the likes of Chris Moore would hopefully defend that a little bit better. But I'd say, take nothing away from Ennis Cameron, because Ian Wilson may not have the technical catalogue of a centre-half, but he's got the frame of, a very large barnyard animal. So to be able to get around them and stick that in the goal is as I say, full credit to Ennis Cameron. And further is continuing brilliant form.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the finish itself is great because it's the only bit of his body that he gets round to the right side of Ian Wilson. Like, he just hooks the leg round. Like, I know where that goal is. I've been banging them in for fun recently. And yeah, hits the back of the net. I'm going to try and be a bit clever for YouTube watchers, shall we say.
Wow.
Here. And there's a young Rovers fan that does one of these vlogs about goes to the games and obviously records a lot of the action. Really good at what he does, which is great. It's good to see someone so enthusiastic about what he's doing. I think we've mentioned him a few times before. He's put up the video, and J Rowe's run is absolutely tremendous. If you've ever watched Band of Brothers, it's like Ronald Spears charging through at Foy. He's just like a man on a mission. Couldn't be stopped. And yeah, it just really summarises a lot of what to like about this Rovers team at the moment and how we've played in the last few games. Leslie, just your perspective on it as well. Anything to add?
Weirdly enough, the Band of Brothers reference, I think, is very apt, because the one thing I think about that move is that, you used to get these bags of soldiers, the toy soldiers when you were kids, these plastic soldiers that came in frames, and there was ones that had like guns and things like that, and ones with radios, and there was one that was just pointing, and I don't know what he was, but there's one that just stood there in a little pound and just points, and that's what Josh Mullen's like. It's like there's that freeze frame of about 1.2 seconds where he just stands and points, and then J Rowe's just like, go, and then sprints off, and tremendous ball. I mean, I've been one of the people who's been a bit critical, shall we say, of J Rowe, but that was spot on. And it does remind you, he does just have that in his locker. A brilliant cross in. I mean, also as well, though, I know Ian Wilson's a great footballer, but as we say, he's not a centre back. But this is weird. I've never ever seen this happen before with Ian Murray, where he's had fit centre backs and has chosen to take a very capable midfielder out of midfield and put him in defence for reasons known only to himself. I mean, I've never seen that happen before. So that's I don't know what he was thinking. That's really weird. But also, I was thinking,
ironically, I think the Morton fans might tell you that the reason for that is if we mentioned the defender was Dylan Corr, they might
of course scored. Yeah,
actually, yeah.
Aye, Dylan Corr dislocated shoulder, to give him his full name. Yeah, and the other thing I was going to say as well is, so Innes Cameron is now on one league goal every 134 minutes for us. So the only player since we came back to the Championship with a better goal per minute ratio than that is Aidan Marsh. And that's skewed by the fact he didn't play a lot of minutes. And so that's tremendous. And it's been a very long time. Even in League One, it's been a very long time since we've had somebody who's been so downright dangerous in the box. I mean, a centre forward who's been downright dangerous in the box. It's been a very long time, with the possible exception of Lewis Vaughan, that we've had anybody who's over more than one or two games actually been really dangerous. And I mean, it does just go to show you as well what a lottery centre forwards are. Because I think a lot of people, when Innes Cameron came in, would have kind of said, all right, he's available. He's a warm body. He might get a couple of goals. And we've also had times we've had people coming in, you're like, oh yes, here we go, this is brilliant. And the guy's completely failed to deliver. This is the categorically the reverse of that. So yeah, I mean, a lot of credit to Innes Cameron just for getting himself into a position where he scores these goals. I know most of them have been within the 6-yard box, but that's what good centre forwards do, because that's where you expect him to be. No, just terrific stuff all round. Again, just goes back to what we were saying before about people having the capability and confidence to make these runs and to make things happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's nice, I think, to give players their flowers in situations like this. Two players, again, different perceptions maybe in terms of when they came in and how they've been performing, but still it's just nice to be sitting here talking about a Rovers team and giving them praise, because that's ultimately a far nicer podcast to do, believe us. Duncan, to come back to you, with 20 minutes to go, there's a triple sub for the Rovers from Dougie Imrie. So he brings on Lewis Vaughan for Ross Matthews, Jordan Doherty comes on to replace J Rowe, and Jack Hamilton comes on to replace Innes Cameron. We've spoken a lot about the depth in the squad. Do you think that's just maybe at that point Dougie Imrie sort of looking to shut up shop, and also one eye on Tuesday, being able to sort of make sure players are ticking over, but also you're bringing in a lot of experience there, but also if you've got a starting lineup that's winning, you maybe want to keep it the same, giving them as much time to recuperate as possible.
Yes, I do. I don't think shutting up shop necessarily, because I don't think it's more sort of defensive than it was. I mean, if anything, it's arguably actually just in terms of pure personnel, arguably slightly more attacking. But I do think it was that kind of fresh legs and just to sort of maintain the energy levels. That's where we were sort of beating Morton hands down. We were running them ragged at times. And it sort of helped to maintain that. It kind of dropped Paul Niso further back again. But he's equally adept at doing that based on the last few weeks. And having a player of Jordan Doherty's quality on the bench is just a huge boon. And it was really what you were saying there about, kind of giving players their flowers. Like J. Rowe, I thought was excellent. Really, really good. I mean, the number of chances that he gets.
Yeah.
So this way, he hits the bar, and he has a header that goes, I think, just wide in the first half.
Yeah.
Then he's got that kind of overhead kick in the second half. He's dangerous a lot of the time. But then, you get to this point, you're 70 minutes into a game, and you've got Jordan Doherty to come on and replace him. And, spoilers for anyone who tries to match of the day this podcast, which is, I imagine, absolutely nobody. That would be an insane thing to do. That would be the
peak of weirdness.
Yeah. Jordan Doherty comes on and proves that he could be just as dangerous in the opposition's box as well. But I think, it's probably, I would say it's almost like 60% one eye on Tuesday, 40% keep the energy levels up, keep managing this game. And without going over 100%, a little bit of actually just getting Jordan Doherty back into the mix again following his injury.
So that was then in turn followed very quickly, Leslie, by an equaliser for Morton. Nathan Shaw taps the ball home from about maybe 6 yards, 10 yards or so. Could you pick apart that equaliser for them? Is there any sort of attribution for where it all went wrong there?
It's a really difficult one. A bit of bad luck. Could have, I think, where you're wanting to nip that move in the bud is before the ball comes into the box to start with, because there's a Morton attack down the right. It ends up coming in. Dara O'Connor clears it, but his clearance goes, I think, straight to Grant Gillespie. Now, if anybody touches Gillespie at this point, it's a penalty, given where the bodies are. Gillespie, in fairness to him, plays a good ball in to Nathan Shaw, who's probably in a wee bit too much space, but again, if anybody contacts with him, there's a chance it's a penalty. It's, again, in fairness, a very good finish from Nathan Shaw. Kind of thing you'd see on the training ground to just sweep it in. It would be a bit harsh, I think, to say we had switched off or down tools or thought we'd won it. But again, it was just something, we saw it with their first goal as well. And just that little bit of, again, complacency is far too strong a word, I think, there. But just that little bit being a little bit too slow to react to what I think at that point, that must have been only their second or their third shot on goal, which is really annoying and infuriating when you think about it. Yeah, so they'd had 3 shots on goal at that point, and 2 of them had gone into the net, which is really damn annoying. But as I say, I think there's a bit of bad luck on Dara O'Connor's part, because he is trying to clear it, except it comes straight into the feet of the onrushing Grant Gillespie, who, again, all credit to him, takes action very quickly and just plays it into Shaw, who maybe could have been picked up by one of the guys in the middle, I don't know, but again, a good finish from Shaw, a really good finish given where he was at the time that he had to act.
So, sorry to just come in on that. Someone better at researching than me, or more committed to it, would have gone back to the full match replay for this. But do you know why Jackson Longridge is in our box as this move develops? Did this come off the back of a corner or something? Because unless Morton's substitutes had changed this, and I don't think it had, Jackson Longridge was playing centre half.
Yeah.
But as the ball comes into the box here, Jordan Doherty is picking up Jackson Longridge. Like, what is a polar bear doing in Arlington, Texas? Like, why is Jackson Longridge there?
Reference.
And it's just what I wrote down when I was kind of watching the highlights, making my notes for this, is I think this is just really unfortunate more than anything else. And maybe that's overly kind. There's the old thing about every single goal is preventable in one way or another. But as the move kind of develops on the right-hand side, first of all, it's good football from Morton. They move the ball really quickly. As the ball comes in, I'm not sure who it is who plays the ball round the corner. It might be Michael Garrity, possibly. Lewis Stevenson gets just a little bit sucked in there. He goes to close him, but Garrity first straight away plays that ball round the corner. Paul Niso reacts really well. Like, he sees that Stevenson's gone, so he picks up the runner. And it's only because that ball goes in first time that he doesn't get the chance to actually close down the cross. I think if the man on the wing it might be Aaron Comrie, if he takes a touch, I think Paul Niso cuts it out. But he doesn't. He gets it in first time. And even at that, Darrell O'Connor still manages to cut the cross out. Oh. And then, as you say, when it comes across, Lewis Stevenson is 6 inches away from getting the first touch. And Grant Gillespie just steals in front of him. Stevenson actually then does well not to foul him. And it's a really good ball across the middle. Nathan Shaw puts it in. Now, again, if we're going to sort of forcibly point the finger at someone, I think with this one, it has to be Josh Mullen. But I'm kind of in the same frame of mind as I was with Paul Niso in the first one, where it's like, if I'm Josh Mullen and I'm looking at that, partly I think you're going, Jackson Longridge is there. Like, who is my man in this situation? Is it still Nathan Shaw, who's probably actually Jordan Doherty's man, but he's picking up this weird wandering centre half? So should I be picked? But I also think, again, like, it's more forgivably in his mind. If you think about what happened with Easton for the goal that we were talking about before, if I'm Josh Mullen and I can see that Jackson Longridge is massively out of position, if the Rovers turn over the ball there, you can spring and you can really get away. So I can see why you might be hanging back a little bit to actually say, right, give me the ball when we get it back. And we don't get it back because Nathan Shaw puts it in the goal. But as you say, with that one, I don't think there's anything in that that's egregious. I think we are a hair's breadth away from stopping that at 4 different points. And it's almost just like a bit of a perfect storm that means it ends up in the goal.
Yeah, completely. And the game rapidly progresses then. As it had all the second half, it was just, I think at that point everyone's sort of saying, oh, no, how's this game to pass? We've been well in charge of the match. But then we very quickly get an opportunity on the 78th minute, which is just 4 minutes later. Callum Fordyce plays the ball into Paul Niso, depending on the perception of it. Throwback to 2006 Arctic Monkeys debut, because he got his dancing shoes on very much there, because he glides forward, beats a couple of men. I think it might have been Grant Gillespie and Aaron Lyle, maybe, before feeding the ball off rather than taking a shot, which is fair enough because there was a ruck of bodies right in front of him. And Dylan Easton runs wide, and then his cross is cut out by the hand or arm of Ian Wilson. So in this latest round of, was that a penalty? Pretty clear for you, Duncan. And then just talk us through. Dylan Easton had scored 16 previous penalties before this attempt yesterday. Unfortunately, unable to continue on such that hot streak. We knew it would have ended eventually, but a degree of frustration there given the circumstances.
Yeah, I suppose. So it's Jordan Doherty who's kind of pushed wide, isn't it? And then as he tries to cut it across. But again, my immediate thought watching it live was like, I think that is a penalty, but it's quite harsh. It's quite kind of forgivable. Like, Ian Wilson's just trying to get himself in the road and the ball hits his hand. Actually, having watched it back, I'm slightly less charitable than that. I think it's that is where, we talk about the kind of difference between the rules for handball and what you feel should be a handball. quite a lot, and it feels like sometimes there's quite a big gap between them. That to me is exactly what you should get a penalty for a handball. If he doesn't use his hand to stop that cross, it's going into a very dangerous area. So, yes, I thought Lloyd Wilson got that absolutely right. And in terms of the penalty, I find it very difficult to get too het up about penalties that are on target, basically. It's very different if you try and be too clever and then you put it over the bar. Then I think you can sort of rightfully have a real go at someone for that. But it's on target. Again, I will repeat myself. Someone who is more committed to doing the research for this podcast would have gone back and found examples within those last 16 penalties where Dylan Easton has done almost exactly that. It's definitely happened where he rolls the ball one way and the keeper goes the other way. And nobody after the game on this podcast or elsewhere was saying, well, you better not do that again because what if the keeper goes the right way? Like, doesn't really make any difference. Ultimately, you kick it, you hope it goes in, and when you've scored the last 16 in a row, you've earned it. You've earned the actually, stepping up to take a penalty, you've earned the right to miss it. That's, you know. So, yes, it was absolutely fine as far as I was concerned. I mean, should anybody be doing daft, stuttery, jumpy penalty kicks? Well, no, actually, not at all. I think that is a stain on the game, but I'm prepared to admit that that's just old man yells at cloud at this point.
Especially when it's
so well before.
One of the things as well with Easton is he takes a lot of different penalties, and by law of averages, one at some point is going to be missed. So the one that annoyed me a lot last season was Kevin Dabrowski failing to save penalties from Anton Dowd's 2 week running because they both went in exactly the same direction, exactly the same place. And, you saw the thing that a Morton fan had put John Connolly and put on the water bottle for where all the Morton players were going to put their penalties. What makes it so hard, I think, with Dylan Easton is just that he will mix it up. He'll go one way sometimes, he'll belt it some other times, he'll roll it some other times. That's what means he's probably got such a good success rate. Again, I don't have the research to back that up. But the law of probability is at one point, a goalkeeper is going to guess it right. And it was going to go wrong at some point. Yeah, I'm in a similar boat to Duncan on this. I'm not a fan of these stuttery run-ups, but that's an issue with football in general rather than a Dylan Easton issue. Goes in the utter woke nonsense bracket. But that's an issue with modern football rather than an issue with Dylan Easton at all.
That's probably an issue with me and you, Les, rather than an issue with Dylan Easton. But I think penalties are what, roughly, is it 3 and 4 on an average? Penalties go in. So to have 16 on the spin, he's way over his batting average for that. So, or the overall batting average, I suppose. So, it's hard to criticise.
Yeah, fully agree. And Dougie Imrie in his post-match interview was very quick to sort of say, even the best players in the world all miss them. Davey did say, I think your response to Andy Milne during the game might have been slightly different, but it has helped when Zach Delaney decides to leave a ball to go out for a corner, and Lewis Stevenson steps up. He's been taking our corners more recently. And Leslie, what did you make of the Morton marking for this? Because aside from Darryl O'Connor, who was in the middle of the penalty box, who in a preview for WrestleMania, which is coming up, was getting manhandled about the place, they chuck a couple of extra bodies on Richard Chin from the looks of things. The man mountain it is. Were they, as I said elsewhere, are they maybe just worried after Aidan Connolly's prowess in the air on Friday night to leave Jordan Doherty to head home a late winner for us in this game? What did you make of the goal?
First question you asked was about marking, and my answer to that was what marking? So there was an absolute ruck of bodies, and I don't know what was going on. I tried to do a bit of research before we go on here to try and work out who should be marking who was going where. I don't know whether the resolution on my device just wasn't quite high enough or whatever, but I could not figure out what was going on. It was, quite frankly, a shambles. Nonetheless, out of this, Jordan Docherty appeared and had a free header straight onto the goal. And my immediate thought was, if that had been us, I would have been raging. But then also credit to Jordan Docherty for actually breaking out and making the space. Again, this is not something I've ever encountered before. I don't remember ever seeing an Ian Murray team struggling to defend cross balls, so I've no idea where this has come from at all. This is a new development. This is brand new information. And as you see, something of what's happened there, two people trying to mark Richard Chin. I don't know whether he's playing mind games with him, whether they're trying to stop him getting the ball to his feet, whether they think he's going to do an Aidan Connolly. I don't know. I just don't know who's quite what was going on there. As I say, I tried to look back and I tried to figure out what the intention was, who was picking up who lost Jordan Docherty, and I just couldn't make head nor tail of it. But I'm very glad that it ended up as things were. Because I say, Jordan's still got to find that space. He's also then still got to leap up and he's still got to get the header on target, all of which he did. And I'm very, very glad to have him back in the team.
Yeah, I mean, even during the corners before, I did notice that I think it might have been Delaney that'd been having a bit like sort of just bumping into Richard Chin, the sort of pre-corner theatrics that you tend to get. And I don't know if that just sort of worked against Morton because they lost the focus. One man who definitely, to use a lovely segue, if I do say so myself then, who did not lose focus was Josh Ray. Jackson Longridge, I think he has a header at the back post initially, just moments before this, which goes wide. But then what Dougie Imrie calls the big moment in a match of big moments, effectively. Jackson Longridge finds himself one-on-one as the ball falls to him, but Josh Ray, who'd had very little to do all afternoon. Duncan, just talk us through how big that was. A watershed moment, really, in terms of just potentially how our season might be defined.
Absolutely. It's absolutely huge. And as we've said, as we've gone through this game, we've skipped over Rovers' chances. Multiple really decent Rovers' chances that in some games this season we'd have had to have built an entire episode around. Morton maybe have 4 chances in this game worth talking about. They score 2 goals. You've got Curtis Main through 1-on-1. And then there's this huge save. You know, it's, like I said at the beginning, it's a really funny game to kind of analyse. But ultimately, you are a piece of outstanding goalkeeping away from a 3-3 draw. And it would have been a barely deserved point for Morton, but that is absolutely nothing for Josh Ray to consider when he has to get himself out there. And it's actually, you mentioned Kevin Dabrowski a minute ago, Liz. I thought it was the best of Kevin Dabrowski. It's I can absolutely see Kevin Dabrowski doing exactly that, with all the other stuff that he did, both good and bad. But that was almost the kind of highest point of his game, probably still is, I imagine, is that like short distance, immediate reaction, make yourself big. And there's quite simply nothing more you can ask of Josh Ray there. He just does everything he needs to do. And a little bit like that playoff game against Partick Thistle, when the ball drops there, you cannot help but think that is a goal. And on that occasion, Brian Graham put it over the bar. That was much funnier. On this occasion, Josh Ray he does his job, but he does his job exceptionally. And Dougie Imrie's right. You know, you can throw the rest of the game away if Josh Ray doesn't make that save. And it very much, I mean, as you say, it is kind of, it sort of prolongs the season for us, really, which I hadn't really thought about it in that sense. But yeah, keeps things interesting by making that stop.
Yeah, well, we returned to 5th place, jumping above Queen's Park. Ayr United also win. They beat Arbroath. So we're up on 39 points at the moment. Dougie Imrie in his post-match interview Leslie refers to it as a basketball game, but also a lot of emphasis in terms of the mentality change within the squad. Now, Davey Hancock rightfully points out that that's also transmitting across to the fans, seeing a team that are beginning to believe themselves. Do you think that's something that's... How important is that sort of as a collective club, both the team and within the fans, we're obviously starting to see that sort of return of the belief and being able to sort of make this people maybe enjoying things a bit more than we were 6 weeks ago or so?
So I was thinking about this. In the last 5 games we've played, we've conceded goals in 4 of them. The 3 of the games, including the Challenge Cup final on this, we've either conceded the first goal or we've gone behind. And clearly with Partick, we ended up losing. But there's 3 games where we've had a setback and we've gone on and we've scored. And it's been a very, very long time since we've had that. It's been a very long time since we've had a situation where we've not thought, if we don't score the first goal, we don't win. We got, I wouldn't say a lot of joy. That's totally the wrong phrase to use when you're talking about Barry Robson. We got results out of Barry Robson by getting a goal and then grinding out a result. We're seeing something a bit different now. That we're not. It's not game over when we concede a first goal. We're not reverting to shelling the ball up to the big lighthouse up top and then seeing what happens. And partly, I think that's due to mentality and just the confidence, but also I think it's just due to a few kind of key changes in personnel. And a big one for me is Callum Fordyce coming back. So a lot of attacks start from the back. And having somebody there who's got the composure to spot the pass, pick it out, play it out wide, play the ball to feet. I mean, Darragh O'Connor, you can see, is kind of learning from that and feeding off it too. He's getting the confidence in doing that as well now. He's done really well since he's come in for Paul Hanlon. So Fordyce has come back. NCO, Montague, you've got a couple of young guys who have got game time that they didn't have earlier in the season. You've got guys that are becoming bona fide options that weren't just 2 months ago. And, I was thinking about it this morning, it's absolutely bananas that you've got a fit Lewis Vaughan and starting him isn't even a consideration. It might be, but you're just not even thinking, right, Lewis Vaughan needs to come back in and we've got to get him back in. So I think that the belief is a big thing. And getting a few results is part of that. But a lot of that also is just, I think, down to the development we've seen in some of the players. And part of that is guys coming back from injury. And the manager, I think, and the backroom staff have got to take credit for that as well. And just how they've been able to bring guys on. Because we've not seen this, as I say, we've not seen this for a long time. And Innes Cameron as well, obviously being another one, giving us totally different set of options up front, enabling us to do things that we haven't been able to do before. So I think partly it is mentality, but also, as I say, I think it's just changes in personnel and that's starting to come together. And I saw somebody make the point on Twitter, I can't remember who it was, saying that we're actually now starting to see the team playing how Dougie Imrie wants us to play, which whoever it was, I think that was absolutely spot on. It's a really good way of putting it.
Just to come in there, for me, see, when we appointed Dougie Imrie, the thing that I was looking forward to, like, aside from the whole, because I think with Dougie Imrie, there's a lot of buy-in in terms of when he's your manager, he's your guy, and he's going to come in and he's going to work his arse off, and he's going to get other people to work their arse off, and you get that buy-in. With me, I was always quietly confident that the performances his team, now obviously I've been critical before about the sort of style of football that he played maybe in that first season that we were doing this podcast. For me though, that last season that we've just had before, that Morton team were playing a lot better football. They maybe weren't seeing the results for it, but the style of play had changed. And I think we're now starting to see sort of the bearing of the fruit of that and being able to sort of, we can mix it up. We've got Innes Cameron up top that can cause chaos, but also as well, we're starting to see the wider players contributing a bit more. We're also seeing our sort of midfielders coming in with the likes of Kai Montague and Paul Niesel being able to drive forward with the ball. And there was multiple occasions where we're seeing that. And I think it's also as well, you're starting to see, because the squad's, like you rightfully say, there's more people contributing, it also forces other people to raise their game. into, if you're coming on, you're going to have an impact. Now, we go into Tuesday night and you're automatically looking at a position where Jordan Doherty's scored, but Jay Rose still had a really good game. So he's got a selection headache now, which is great. But that's kind of what I'd hoped to see before, and we're now seeing it, which makes me even more optimistic than I was before, which I was already pretty over the top in terms of my optimism. Duncan, I'm just going to come back to you now. We go into Queen's Park on Tuesday. We obviously lost the last league fixture there, which was Barry Robson's final game. We won in the Challenge Cup on penalties. Now, a lot has been made of our away form this season, which is rightfully so, and the lack of goals, the lack of wins. Is this really the big litmus test on how far we've come since that last derby at East End Park?
Yes, I think it is. We spoke after that game about, are we a bad team or are we just bad away from home? And I think now it's a case of, are we a good team or are we just good at home and at neutral venues? And, maybe I am just a kind of hopeless optimist. And I was always like, yeah, you know what? Once we get back to Starks Park, I think we'll be fine. And now I'm like, nah, we're really good, actually. It doesn't matter where we play. We'll go anywhere and we'll be really good. So, yes, I think you're right. I mean, I apologise for not crediting the poster by name here, but I can't remember who it was. Someone on Pine Bovril this morning saying that that Brecon side that beat us in the playoffs. Sorry, I should have had a trauma warning for bringing it up, but they beat us in the playoffs, and then the season after they were, the worst team of all time, and something ridiculous, like 4 points over the course of the season, ludicrously bad. They scored 10 goals away from home that season, and we have 6 right now. So there is a very, very reasonable chance that we could finish the season with fewer goals than that. But if we are going to overhaul the behemoths of Brecon City and that record, Tuesday would be as good a time as any to chalk up a couple of goals and try and overcome that point. But certainly won't be easy. Queen's Park, obviously a very tricky side to kind of analyse over the course of the season. They've had some very poor results that felt like for a long time it was Josh Fowler and 10 other guys, and then Josh Fowler went away, and you think, well, these 10 other guys are going to get relegated, and they've come on leaps and bounds. Sean Crichton obviously deserves a massive amount of credit. Like Les said earlier on, there's a reason why the Rovers and Morton went into that game on Saturday with the same number of points. They can be good, they can be bad. Queen's Park are in exactly that same boat. Watched them on Friday night, and again, it's like, this is a team that has the capacity to be really quite good. I thought Aidan Connolly was brilliant in that game. A real reminder of how fun he is to watch when he's on form. But at the same time, there are clear weaknesses in that side as well. Yeah. They're not a team of world beaters. They are a side that, if you want to be a top 4 side in the championship, and, at time of recording, we are technically still in that mix, you have to beat Queen's Park.
Yeah.
Probably in the same way that you have to beat Wraith Rovers. You have to beat Greenock Morton. If you don't win those games, you're not going to finish in the top 4. So, yes, it is very interesting, but that is an incredibly good thing to be saying, because, again, you go back 4 weeks even, there are a lot of other adjectives that we could have been using going into this game, like terrifying and distressing, or even boring, just dead rubber. But actually, we're playing well. It's been really, really good to watch this Rover side over the last few weeks. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to it. For the third time this season, I have a ticket to go to this shoebox next to a football stadium, and I'm once again quite looking forward to it. Actually,
Yeah, well, one loss, one draw, technically. So hopefully you can complement it with a win. I did have a look before we just preparing for this podcast this evening. So within the last 5 games in the league, we're third or fourth best in form. I think we might be fourth in terms of that. But then when you go to switch it to 10 games, 15 games, and 25 games, I think it is, that they have on flash score. Queen's Park are above us in all of those, and in fact, in 15 games, they're the third best team in the league. I think they've taken 25 points out of the last 15 games. Leslie, I'm going to really annoy you now, but Sean Crichton, I would actually have him down as one of the big unsung heroes of Scottish football, actually, just at the moment. I get that a lot of the plaudits are going to go to Derek McInnes, John McGlynn, James Murphy-Askew at Motherwell. But for me, the work that he's done to be able to stabilise them, given the uncertainty off the pitch, and also as well to be able to sell your best player effectively and then still improve, is pretty remarkable. I would also say within their last 5 games, they've only had one goal that's been scored by that's not been an ex-Rover, and that was Michael Roof. So it's been Ewan Murray's had a few that have gone in, and then Ian Connolly as well. Just with regards to this one, Les, as Duncan kind of alluded to there, a win for either team is going to confirm their safety. In fact, probably a draw is going to confirm their safety given the goal difference for Rovers. But could it also potentially represent a potential opportunity for either side? And I think from a Rovers perspective, I mean, if we go back to that last game at Lesser Hampden in the league, Queen's Park hadn't won since January at that point. I think it was late November, maybe, at that point that we had that with Barry Robson. So that may be a lesson that not everything lasts forever in terms of form. Maybe if we can potentially win this one, do we just need to kind of write off all our away days from previously before and just kind of think, well, we've got Arbroath coming up at the weekend. If we can win this one, we're 2 points behind them if we beat them. Is that kind of got to be the mentality we're at?
I think we can actually, just to an extent, go for it. So there was a point during the Morton game where I was thinking, right, okay, the most important thing is Airdrie are not winning. They're getting pumped off St Johnstone. Then Morton equalised, and I thought, actually, it still isn't the worst thing in the world, because that's still then meaning that with the point differentials and things like that, Airdrie are then needing to take something from 3 of their last 4 games. And then it suddenly flips completely, and you're thinking, right, actually, no, we've won this, and barring some freak accident, we don't need to look down the table anymore. As I say, my own view is that I just think it's going to be a bridge too far to make fourth. I think we're relying on factors that are out with our control. It's a small squad, and I suspect it will just be a stretch too far to do that. That said, the longer we can keep the illusion up, the better it is for morale, for everybody's mentality. It's better for the guys, the players that are maybe thinking about coming back next season, the players who might be trying to attract back next season. The longer we can keep that illusion going, the better. I mean, as I say, end of last season, with Barry Robson in charge, the black hole of charisma. And yet, you know, I'm sure the last couple of weeks of that season were probably good for an extra 50 to 100 season tickets. You know, just the fact that we were in it and everybody came along. I don't think you could put a financial figure on it, but I'm pretty sure it must be in the region. It's gonna, that kind of thing is going to get people signed up for next season, an exciting end to the season. So, I mean, absolutely, I think the first thing is that we just have to try and keep it rolling on as long as we can. I do think, as I say, I think it's going to be too big an ask. Queen's Park, as you say quite rightly, I was being a bit flippant, but in all seriousness, they've done a great job. You'd imagine there'll be a number of clubs higher up the pyramid looking very closely at Sean Crichton, as they will with Mark Wilson. I think if you're looking at manager of the season, you'd be looking at one of those two, not the boy with the name, his name's on the Ales. But I mean, I just don't know what to expect from this. I think the first thing is if even a draw means you're then going into the Arbroath game with the possibility of going 3 points behind them. And that just keeps it alive to an extent. Queen's Park will be thinking the same thing. They'll be thinking, they've got a chance as well. So, I mean, they've got tough games. Like, they've got Partick and Dunfermline, if I remember rightly. They've also got Morton, who are probably going to try and they'll be looking for points as well to get to secure their safety, which, again, I think they'll probably do. So, both teams have got tough run-ins. Both teams will be in a similar position where they're thinking, look, we're basically safe now. We can just go for it and see what happens. The one thing I would just say, though, is if we get beat, this is where I'd start getting minutes into the younger guys that we know are definitely going to be here next season. To an extent, We're doing that already. So Kai Montague's played a lot. Jay Rowe has been playing a lot. He's signed up for next season. I'm assuming he's going to be here. It makes sense to get minutes in him. Richard Chin's probably the only other one who's available. Just get him on, get the minutes in, and give him the extra 3, 4, 5 games under his belt when he's coming into next season with. So I think if we lose this one, I think it basically just becomes a training exercise from then on in, just to get the minutes into the guys that are going to be here next season, especially the younger guys. But as I say, all we can do is go out and give it our best shot and try and overcome that atrocious record of away goals and wins.
Yeah, fully agree. The sooner that gets put to bed, the better, as far as I'm concerned. It's not going to be a shock. Nobody's going to be really sitting there thriving as they type up posts about how bad we've been on the road. But, it stands to reason. But also, I'm very much at the perspective, if we get a win against Queen's Park, it all really does become a bit irrelevant. I'm wildly on the positive side with this sort of thing, to the shock of nobody. But, yes.
I am so concerned by how optimistic I have become over this. It's that thing of well, hang on a second, and it's because it's all ifs.
Yeah,
but you're not talking about ludicrous scenarios. Go right. If we beat Queen's Park, now, as we've just said, Queen's Park, very good side. As you said, Les, they will be thinking exactly the same thing. In fact, this does apply to both teams. Suddenly you go, right, if we win on Tuesday, suddenly we're kind of touching distance to the playoffs again. And then for us in particular, we then play Arbroath next. Arbroath aren't in very good form. We've been to Gayfield and won before. That's not, again, we're not talking about...
We've beaten Arbroath comprehensively this season as well.
Absolutely. Suddenly it starts to feel very, very tangible again. And even looking at, it seems like the narrative is obviously completely shifted. It's almost like nobody's even looking at Dunfermline anymore. It's like, Arbroath are struggling. Can we haul in Arbroath?
Yeah.
But Dunfermline have got to play Airdrie on Tuesday night. By all accounts, they are going to have to put out the secondest of strings because they've already got injury problems and they play in the cup at the weekend. So if they don't beat Airdrie midweek and they then don't have a game at the weekend, suddenly, again, they can have real kind of pressure on them if there's, again, us or Queen's Park, get a couple of results in a row. Those playoff spots suddenly that looked nailed on 3 or 4 days ago. I'm worried by how I was scoffing the loudest anyone has ever scoffed when Graham Meldrum raised this prospect last week.
Aye. Me and Graham were very much in that same boat. We were proper here, by the way, and everyone's like, shut the fuck up. Just shut up. Nonsense.
We're only 11 points.
Yeah.
Graham said we're only 11 points behind Arbroath. I was like, we are not going to get 11 points, let alone 11 points more than. And now I'm like, yes, come on, this is easy as that. No bother.
I was getting referred for certain substances. We're getting reference from certain members of our group chat asking me what had been taken. But we can only look as far as Tuesday, of course.
Absolutely.
And we can't take it any further than that because
as soon as we getting carried away.
Yeah. if we did lose on Tuesday, and again the away record, people will point to that and sort of say, well, we've not done this or we've not done that, and that's going to feed into it. Then automatically it just becomes what the fuck were you talking about? Why was you referencing that? Which would be, you'd be well within your rights to do. You would be well within your rights to do.
This is why we're doing it now.
Yeah.
We probably will get beaten Tuesday and we won't get the chance.
Yeah, we're just putting our check on ourselves. This is the brakes being gently applied. Duncan, just to round us off on our second last point here, does Dougie Imrie make any rotations? I kind of alluded to it before. J. Rowe puts in a really good performance, but Jordan Doherty gets a goal. So do you think he's going to potentially roll the dice on any changes, or stick with that start 11 even after those changes in the second half?
I think it's I don't know, actually, in terms of what Dougie Imrie will do. I don't feel like I kind of know him well enough yet to sort of predict whether he'll stick with the same team or not. You'd think, we've played a lot of football recently. You think that would lend itself to one or two changes. But again, I thought, that game ended up closer than I think it probably should have been. Played very, very well. I don't think you could criticise if he put out the same 11. For what it's worth, from my side of things, I hastily scribbled down an 11 there. I would make two changes for this. I would bring Lewis Vaughan back in for Kai Montague. Kai Montague, I think, has been playing really, really well. It is in no way a case of him being dropped. I just think it's that he's played a lot of football recently.
And I think Lewis Vaughan looked very lively yesterday. I do have to say that. Had a couple of shots, was getting in and about the place. Good time for him to come back in for me.
Absolutely. He's had that kind of injury, and then he's been back, played a little bit of football, kind of in and out the team. But now it's a case of like he should be back up to speed. Go and start a game, put him in behind Ennis Cameron. We see how much Ennis Cameron gets involved with the players who are behind him. He's not just forward facing, leading the line. He does come back, he does link up, and I think that could be great foil for Lewis Vaughan. I would kind of keep J. Rowe out at right back, kind of for just what I mentioned there about Vaughan. He's come back from his injury and he's had a few appearances and is now ready to start again. I don't think there's no point rushing Jordan Doherty back. I'm not suggesting he is being rushed back, but you've got the luxury of J. Rowe's just had a really good game, in decent form, got that assist, let him keep the jersey. Jordan Doherty absolutely scored a goal, so he is first off the bench. But, I'm happy to kind of hang fire on him. And then I would play Richard Chin. Again, no negative reflection on Josh Mullen whatsoever. Just another one who's had quite a lot of football recently and who you have an alternative standing by.
Yeah.
With an element of what Les was saying as well, that, we're coming towards the end of the season. It makes sense to get a few more minutes into some of these guys, and I don't think you necessarily have to wait until you're into, dead rubbers. It's as Richard Chin's good.
Yeah.
It's as good a chance as any to get him some minutes. So, yeah.
I think as well, if you look at the left-hand side of Queen's Park, they've got Henry Fields in that left back, done really, really well this season. I think he's been a very, very good young player. And if you can have someone that can preoccupy him on the defensive side, that would be a positive. Not that I don't think Josh Mullen wouldn't do that, but I think that with Chin's, I don't know, we joke about him being an agent, a chaos type factor. Throw that in, maybe has a bit to think about. Leslie, for you, is there anyone that you would want to see brought in, or are you quite happy in terms of the lineup staying similar?
I'd be happy to start with the same lineup. I think, like Duncan says, I think any changes that we do make will simply be a matter of minutes, and the fact that we've had to go to the well quite a lot for quite a lot of players. You could make a case for Winter coming back in if he's fit, but then again, he's not offering you anything unique or outstanding. Chin maybe has earned the right to start, having caused a lot of chaos and trouble in recent weeks, provoking quarrels and picking fights. We do have a healthier bench than we've had before. We've got attacking options there. It's not quite a tiger cage, more a Noah's Ark, with a range of all kind of animals of different levels of aggression capability. But there are options there. Vaughan, I think, is one too. He's, depending on how you slice it and how you categorise things, there is potential that he is going to be looking for that 100th asterisk goal. That could happen. He's going to be up for that. And if you've got him on, we have seen before there has been a side of Lewis Vaughan that can come out when he's looking for a goal that maybe makes him less likely to be a bit of a team player. Then again, you want a bit of fight. You maybe want somebody who's going to do that. He's got quality, he's got danger, and he's got a good record at Big Hampden with goals. So that's like Duncan says, that's maybe one that we might see. And again, that's not a slight on Montague. That is simply a matter of minutes and freshness. But I would expect Vaughan to feature no matter what, and I'd expect Chin to feature at some point in the evening, no matter what. I think it's just a question of who starts. And we'd probably see the subs a bit earlier, around the 50-55 minute mark when they do happen.
Yeah.
You also need somebody else in the park to take a penalty now that big dafty Dylan Easton can't do it anymore.
Well, that's it. Who's going to be next in line? Because I'd wager that Big Innes is going to be asking for it. But if Lewis Vaughan's on that pitch, good luck to anyone that's going to try and fight Lewis Vaughan off a penalty. So, I mean, of course, being a bit presumptive as we always are, that we'll get any penalties anytime soon. But I mean, yeah, huge opportunity for Rovers, and if we can get that win, I know it's the big if, but we're getting into big bar of belief territory then, and I think would be very much ever increasing numbers should we be able to get that result, but still going to be very, very tough. And to round us off, I know we're still kicking the arse at this episode. Goal of the season contenders, we've got 6 goals. Duncan, you asked to talk a little bit about this. Who's your pick out of the 6 goals? So we've got Dylan Easton's, a couple for him, one against Ayr, one against Airdrie, Scott Brown's 2 against Hamilton Accies and Arbroath, J. Rowe against Ross County, and then of course Big Innes at home recently against Ayr United.
Yeah, I largely wanted to mention this so I could stick up for J. Rowe again, and I did it earlier on anyway. But no, genuinely, J. Rowe got my vote for this. I think it's the most aesthetically pleasing of the goals that are here, particularly taking the kind of circumstances into account as well. I like Scott Brown's against Arbroath. I think the goalkeeper doesn't move. It takes away a huge amount from it. And then the one against Hamilton is great as well, but it's Hamilton's Bairns, so you've got to deduct a wee bit. Whereas J. Rowe, I think the chief qualifier, the chief attribute for goal of the season for me is the goal that made you go, oh yeah, fuck the most. And for me, it's that J. Rowe one where he just runs onto it, hits it, keeps it low, but I don't think it touches it straight. Aye, that is, as is the case in lots of different scenarios, it's J. Rowe for me.
And for you, Leslie, what was your opinions on
it? Definitely Big Innes against Ayr. I just think for the technical ability, the way he brushes the defender out the way, for taking it and for just spotting the keeper off his line, the technical ability required to get that in and over the keeper is absolutely tremendous. So for me, it has to be Big Innes as well. I did like Scott Brown's against Arbroath. The problem is it's a bit like Lewis Stevenson's against Hamilton last season, which was spoiled by the fact that Lewis Vaughan was lying injured in the ground. It's spoiled by the fact that we ended up going on to lose the game. It is a good goal. J. Rowe as well. Yeah, I agree. It's an incredible shot, an incredible strike. And this again, as you see, just a nice reminder. He's got that in his locker, but not for me. Goal of the season is Innes Cameron against Ayr United.
Yeah, I feel for Scott Brown in the sense that he's replicated perfectly his goal against Dundee United, but as Duncan says, it's in the Challenge Cup in that early round against a very, very young and inexperienced Hamilton Accies team. And it's also quite funny hearing Graham on the tannoy at that point going, what a goal. Far more enthusiastically than I could even do right now. I'm right in the same boat, fully on with the love bombing for Big Innes for me, Leslie. 2 goals against Ayr United. in this list, of course, both of them being lobs against their United keepers, so not ideal if you're an enthusiast down at Somerset Park. Very hilarious if you are called Graham Meldrum, though, or part of the Meldrum clan in that neck of the woods. But yes, of course, we'll round things off for this evening. So a bit of a bumper episode, clocking in at the 1 hour and 40 minute mark. So thank you, gents, for spending your Sunday evening talking through that rather chaotic energy that was Raith Rovers against Greenock Morton. Fingers crossed that we'll be back for a post-match with even more rampant optimism if we can get this win. Of course, all eyes on Tuesday night. We'll see how it pans out. Thank you for taking the time to listen, and bye for now.